Welcome back to the Weaving Magic podcast. I'm your host, Tara Webb.
And I'm your host, Alyssa Lilly.
And today we have one of our favorite people in the entire world. We've already interviewed her before, and she has just some special goodies to chat about today, but we wanted to bring her back on specifically for what's coming out. So Rachael, thank you for being on the podcast again. We are so excited to talk about what you are bringing on to this. I don't want to say yet.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me, Tara and Alyssa. It's so good to see you. Sorry, my daughter's calling me downstairs. Well, that's what happens when we totally Sunday morning podcast. We got kids calling us from downstairs.
And that's the magic of doing all the things. Alyssa and I talk about that so much, of not wanting to split our lives apart. You know, we hear so much nowadays of if you're on a Zoom call, you have to be really quiet and you have to, have your camera on and it has to be muted and you have to be presentable and all of these things. You can't have any
But if my
noise
kids want to come in and hug me, they're going to come in and hug me, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think actually, I don't know about you guys, but I often find that when I'm listening to a podcast or on a Zoom call and someone's kid shows up, I actually love it. Because it reminds us that we're all living life, that we're all just out here living our life, and that, nothing has to be this formal. And I think another thing, which is so timely, is this concept of balance and finding balance in our life and balancing, our professional side with our family side, balancing mom side, entrepreneur side, all of that. And right now, today is the new moon in Libra, which is all about that, searching for balance in your life. It also happens to be the start of Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year tonight. And that's also a holiday that is very much about balance. Now, when I was raised learning about this time of year, there was a lot of shame and guilt, because the concept was we were looking at us being balancing out our sins with our value, not our values, but our, the word is mitzvot. So our, what's the word I'm looking for? Our
deeds,
our good deeds. Yes. We have to balance out our sins with our good deeds. And so this time of year, called the High Holy Days, was all about prayer and repentance and doing all the good things, giving all the charity, which, by the way, when I'm done with you guys today, I'm doing lots of charitable givings. That's what I'm doing today to honor the new moon and Rosh Hashanah. It's actually good energy for that today. But there was a lot of shame and guilt. And even, as an adult, I'm not religious at all, but I always found that I would have so much shame and guilt this time of year because of that religious conditioning. And a few years back, I had this big epiphany. So I was taught as a kid that we have to do all this prayer and repentance this time of year, because this time of year, between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the start of the new year and the Day of Atonement, God is judging us. He's actually weighing our sins versus our virtues. And on Yom Kippur, on the Day of Atonement, our fate is sealed for the following year. And God is going to write us either in the book of life or the book of death. And it's sealed on Yom Kippur, which is why we have these 10 days to prove ourselves, right? Prove our value. And then I had this realization that this isn't about a judgmental God, sitting down on high, judging us as being worthy or unworthy. This heightened energy at this period of time, the Libra season, the autumn equinox, this concept of balance, is really about learning how to embrace our own fullness. Find this balance within our life, the balance of light and shadow, the balance of our different roles, recognizing how all of it is part of what makes us whole, and that when we are able to embrace all of ourselves and accept and love ourselves as a full, whole, complete being with the shadow, with the quote unquote sins, then we choose ourselves. We choose life for ourselves, and we write ourselves in our own book of life. So that was a big perspective shift for me so that I can go in.
Powerful stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And that way I can go into this season with this kind of heightened energy around balance, around self-love, around interconnectivity and giving, and kind of the social justice stuff that Libra really does bring up for us, this knowing that we're all in this together and we want to find balance in that way too. I can come into this season honoring those things without feeling like I am less than, I need to do this to be worthy. It's coming from a place of like actual resonance as opposed to prescribed fear and like proof of worth. So anyway.
It's so fascinating how things can be, oh gosh, words are difficult in this very moment, but
Mercury retrograde.
Yay! But how somebody's interpretation can shift.
Yeah.
And especially in the role of church and, you know, somebody getting up and saying, this is what this holiday is for, this is what it means. But when you shift that perspective to what you're saying, it seems more like a loving and embracing God that I could get on the side of, you know what I mean? Versus this judgmental being. And it's this, you're saying the same thing, but in a light of love versus a light of judgment. And I
think ultimately it's the perception is whether or not you believe that in a divine, in a God that is sitting up high judging you, or whether or not you believe that the divine exists inside all of us. And it is this personal relationship we have with ourselves and with our life that is the actual religion of our life, that is the actual connection we have with divinity.
And even when we look, I know this wasn't the plan for the podcast. You all know how it is. We like to go on our tangents, but if we look at different religions too, it's a lot about embracing and embodying the divinity, not looking at the divinity as something separate from yourselves. And it's the misinterpretation that takes us away from that and makes us forget or be taught out of our power.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it is also the integration, right? Of all of the fullness of life, because as humans, we can very much classify our feelings as like desired versus undesired, the stuff that feels good versus the stuff that feels terrible. And we try to repress or run or hide from or escape or numb from, right? We've all experienced that. And I remember one time, this is so funny, but I was watching a show and in the show, there was like one of the main characters dies. And I was like so sad and I was crying and I felt an angel behind me whispering to me. Like I felt like this mediumship come in and I felt an angel tell me, how beautiful is your sorrow right now? And I could actually tap into the beauty of the experience of really feeling grief and sorrow. And from this kind of more universal perspective, how every single one of our emotions are valuable and seen as divine from the perspective of the universe, from the perspective of divine. And that when we come here as humans, we come in to feel it all of it. And so even though when we're in a place of sorrow and grief and we just don't want to feel that from the perspective of divine, that is so beautiful and just as powerful as the feeling of love and connection and joy. And it's hard to hold on to that vibration. That vibration comes in for me in like little moments of when I'm like experiencing someone else's sorrow that I can feel, but it's not my own. Obviously, when it's your own, it's really hard to tap into that more universal perspective. But I think what you were talking about with this idea of like perception and perspective, in terms of like making our own new perspectives around religion in particular, that to me is real magic and real miracles. Because, I mean, I remember Marianne Williamson defines miracles as a change in perception, shifting of our mind. That's what a miracle really is. And the way I think of magic, and this is going to kind of dive more into the rest of our conversation, but the way I think of magic is a intentional shifting and manipulation of energy. And when we're able to shift our perception, we're actually shifting our energy, which is why we feel different when we have one perspective versus another. That's the magic, right? So understanding that we have a lot more power over our own perception creates so much empowerment within us and can be very, very liberating. So yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, and there's so much science behind that too. It's connecting religion and science and all these different things and how they intertwine with each other. You know, changing your perspective and changing the way that you think about things and choosing intentionally to do things changes the wiring in your brain and the way that you start thinking, and can totally transform you from a negative victim mindset to an empowered one. right?
Yes.
When you start healing your trauma and choosing to switch your perspective, it's magical.
100%. 100%. Yeah. So it's kind of cool because on the call today, I mean, I know this will probably air later, but today is New Moon Libra, and it's just like we have this beautiful energy to work with that's wanting to help us shift our perspective, gain a higher perspective. So that's really beautiful.
Which I think
Happy
is
New Moon,
fascinating
everyone.
as we're going into the, the womb space, the cocoon that's, fall and winter.
Yeah.
You're shifting your perspective, because when you go into that space, it's much easier to be harder on yourself because you are, more internal during those times. And you're right. We were always taught in our religions that there's something wrong with us. And so for going into that winter stage, there's something wrong with me. I shouldn't be feeling this way. I shouldn't be doing this, that kind of thing. And I think it's interesting, like tying stuff back to, Easter around the spring equinox and like what that means and like what each of those can actually, like when you connect the dots between them, mean with the energies around you, because they all just correlate together. That's why they actually created it, I believe, around the religions. Like they went back into the old beliefs. It's like, oh, it's the equinox. Let's put this in on that little section there because that's going to fit in really well. They did their research. We should do ours.
Yep. Well, I think religion ultimately recognized that the only way to get people to join them was to, and this is the same thing with changing habits, you guys, right? Like it's the same thing we go into when we change habits, where you like shift habits small ways, and then ultimately you realize, oh, I've completely shifted my habits. Like that's what they did with bringing religion in and kind of killing off the more earth-based religions that were there before, was they just kind of came in and repackaged a holiday now to be about, Jesus or whatever it might be. And just kind of repackaged it. So people were still doing aspects of it, but now with a different focus. But it was, and then ultimately a few generations down the line, all of a sudden now it has a completely different spin on it. But it's still, and this is really interesting, but it's the roots of it are still in these earth-based practices. Mm-hmm. And that's why for my book that's coming out in October, Everyday Plant Magic, I actually start the book with a letter to the reader saying, welcome back. Welcome back, because I believe that everything that I'm sharing in this book is actually remembrances that we all hold inside of us. It's remembrances of our body and our energy's connection with nature. It's our remembrance that we are nature. And so we very naturally cycle with things like the seasons, with the moon and the sun, understanding the directions and the elements and feeling the elements within us. Like this is something that our DNA knows. It knows. So, yeah.
I'm excited.
I'm so excited for your book. Oh my goodness.
I have such a difficult time at the moment with plants. Like I do my best to keep them alive. So I'm excited to look at your book from this perspective, because there are so many books out there about plants and like you watered this and this and like all these specific things. And I feel like yours is just more intuitive. It's going to be more about how you're feeling into and connecting with them. So
yes,
the last time you were on our podcast, I'm pretty sure it was, we recorded it a year ago in October, I think. And it didn't, it launched earlier this year, but I don't remember if you had received your book deal at that point or not.
I think I was writing. I was in active writing mode. Yeah. Yeah.
So how does it feel, like that transition? How do you feel from like where you were in that moment to now?
Oh my goodness. I love that question so much, because actually this morning when I was doing like my morning practice and my meditation and just like preparing for this call today, I was flooded with one of those moments where you're like, oh, I'm living in a manifestation. You know what I mean? Like when you just know you're in that moment where you're like, I'm in it. This is what I was calling in. I'm here. So I just got chills on my arms. So I'm just, I really, in this now moment I'm in right now, like I feel so grateful. I'm feeling so aligned. I'm feeling so in flow. And I'm really, really just honing in on where I was last year, where I am now, and this feeling of, it's not completion because I still know there's so much more to go, but it's a sense of pride in some ways. I think sometimes pride gets a little bit of a bad rap, but I think it's really powerful to feel proud of your creations. So I'm feeling really proud of this creation. I'm feeling really ready for it to be birthed into the world. I really do feel like this book is so appropriate for this time we're living in. And I really feel like this book has a lot less to do with me and has so much more to do with our relationship with Earth and with our own soul. So, and I think that is where humanity is like very much at a crossroads right now. And what we're seeing around the world has a lot to do with reclamation of our own soul and understanding that we are part of this greater kind of macrocosm that is connected with us. So I just feel like the world is ready for this book. This book is ready for the world. And I've been having such amazing conversations around it. And I'm just so excited about it. And yeah, you shared that there's a lot of plant books out there. There's a lot of herbology books out there. There's a lot of plant green witch magic books out there. This book, it's a little bit different. It combines lots of different things, but it's really about the energy of the plants and working with their energy and understanding that everything is energy, and that when we know that, that's when we can start creating magic, because magic is the moving, the shifting, the intentional manipulation of these energies to create a sense of more connection and wholeness in your life.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
When you wrote your book, I'm curious on how this book would apply to someone who may be more seasoned in energy work versus someone who's brand new and knows nothing about it.
Okay, great. That's a really good question. So what's interesting about this book is a plant magic book, but in the introduction, there's a whole section on the chakra system because I'm an energy worker. And so that's very often the magic that I work has to do with the chakras and with energy flow in the human body. And one of the ways I use plants is to help to create more flow of energy in my clients. We use the plants to help more energy be released and received. So for newbies,
do plants have chakras?
That's a really good question. They have their own energy systems and they have auras. I wouldn't say their chakras are necessarily the same as ours. Obviously, they have root chakra. Obviously, they have kind of the crown chakra, of the trees themselves. That's a really good question. I need to go to my plants with that. I'm going to go to my plants with that and ask them and see what they share with me, because I'm like, for sure we can see the root and the crown. And I know that every single plant impacts us on the heart chakra level, just in the way that they create air for us to breathe, which our lungs are covered by the heart chakra.
Is there throat chakra as well? I don't know, I'm just curious, like when you say, like maybe connect it with the idea of like how you're helping heal people's energies and like connect to their energies to theirs. I feel like there's some common ties there.
Yeah, I'm going to take that into meditation. I'm going to ask my plants to share with me more about that, because that's fascinating. And now I'm like, ooh, I want to find out more. Because I'm like thinking even about like the heart chakra and also the way they move like water and nutrients through them, and scent, right? Like they use scent a lot to communicate with each other. So I'm like, ooh, I got to take this into meditation. Great question. I don't have the answer to it, but I'm gonna see what the plants want to share with me. I love it. We'll have to you'll have to check back in and see what comes out with that one. I'm like, I need to write that down. That's such a good question.
So back to Alyssa's question.
Yeah. So for newbies, there's a lot in there just to kind of introduce you to the chakra system. I have a whole little section that also lets you know, like, here's what the chakra feels like when it's in balance, in actual balance, and here's what the chakra feels when it's imbalanced, out of balance. And here are some ways to use nature to create more balance and more flow in this chakra. For those people who are a bit more familiar with energy work, you'll see that for each plant and each plant profile, I share about the metaphysical properties of that plant, and I also share about the chakras that plant aligns with, crystals you can use with that plant, places that you can actually place the plant or utilize the plant for more magic in your life, the elements that also align with that plant. So there's a lot of correspondence that I share in terms of the plants and other energies. And so that's a way for people who are more familiar with energy to really start diving in and like work with the correspondence side of things.
And I love this, your unique magic in this way, because I love herbology and I would consider myself pretty seasoned, but I never, until we met, thought about placement of plants in my home and what energy they're giving me by doing that, or maybe working against me in some ways, having a very cactusy, vibrant plant in my bedroom may not be the best idea, but for my workspace, I think that's great.
Yes. And this kind of falls a little bit into feng shui, which is the idea of how placements, how we place things in our home, create a flow of energy or a lack of flow of energy. And while I am not by any means a feng shui artist, not artist, but a feng shui expert or someone who has mapped out my whole home, I have used certain aspects of it. And one of the rituals in the book actually shares the Bagua map, which is like the map that you can use to show you the different areas of your home that correspond with different themes in your life. And it can show you, like, for example, in your home, whether it's a specific room or the home itself, the back left corner is the corner for abundance and opportunity, financial opportunities and financial wealth. Yeah. You're like, where's my back left corner?
Well, that's the question I have. Is that like when you walk into the room, it's the back left corner, or if it's like you're walking into the house and
right.
Like
it's both. You can use,
okay.
Yeah. So you can use it. So the way I've learned is that every floor of your house is its own map, right? So like the first floor would be a map, and if you have multiple levels in your home. So each floor is going to be its own map. You can certainly look at the whole floor plan of the house and have that be the whole map. So, when you walk in the front door, that's going to be your front. There's different ways of looking at feng shui in particular. There's like the more traditional view, in which case you have your compass and like you have to find north first. And then other people who are like, we're just going to start at the front door and then like map it from there. So a more modern approach. Or you can also use the Bagua map for just one room. So let's say you have an office space, like let's say it's your office and a workspace. You can just do your office. You can even use it just for your altar or just for your desk, right? So let's say you're just going to feng shui your desk. So you can have your desk space and you can use the map to represent and make your desk into, it's basically like you're creating 9 squares, like a tic-tac-toe board, right? You're creating 9 squares and each one of those squares has a different theme. So it's totally up to you. Yeah, you can do it small
where we're
or big.
Recording right now is in my left corner of my office coming in from the door. So yes,
that's
abundance.
perfect. Yes, and not to mention also it's your workspace. Yeah. And actually where I am, I'm kind of more centered, but I do have a plant in my back left corner. I'm like pointing at it right there. I do have a plant in the back left corner right there too. So yeah, so it can really be like as small as a desk or as big as your entire floor plan. Yeah.
And that's something I've also learned with like looking a bit with feng shui. It's like whenever you do your altar, your deities want to face out the door. So they don't want to be like trapped inside the room. So it's like, I had to learn like where to put my deities or the altar for my deities.
Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. Cool. Yeah. And so I think in the book, I also share a little bit about, in the part where I talk about elements in the book, because I also there's 45 magic plant profiles, but in the introduction, I talk about the sun, the moon cycles, the directions, the elements, the seasons. I talk about making an altar. I talk about activating your magic, which is an energy practice to open the root chakra, the crown chakra, pull an energy from earth and cosmos, and then flood the solar plexus. And when you have all this energy filling up the solar plexus and you just feel so lit up, that is you with your magic activated. So I share that in the introduction because it's kind of the start to every ritual from there. And I share a bit in there about, like, especially with the elements, I'm sharing about how you can also use decor items in your home to represent each of these elements. So like if you do like to create an altar, I personally like to have something to represent each element on my altar. And so that can be all kinds of different things, from like feathers and flags for air to shells, or just a vase with water.
Sigils.
Yeah. I mean, it's infinite. You can get so creative with it and have so much fun. And I think we're supposed to. I think that's part of the magic.
So I'm curious about, you said that this book is less about you and more, what's needed for the earth right now, for us as a collective. And I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, that it's different from where you started this idea of the book, right? It's different, your progression from where you wrote the book, and then had to go through the publishers and all this kind of stuff. I would love to hear how you have grown along this arc to where your book is about to be published.
Oh, what a beautiful question. Thank you so much. So in the acknowledgement section of my book, I actually thank all the rejection that I had around this book. I'm like, and to the rejection, thank you. Because I had so much rejection around this particular concept of this book. And what was so cool about that is that even though it did take me down into some dark places and I did find myself spiraling with anxiety, it actually was the catalyst that pushed me into taking courses and investing in my own, especially intuitive skills. So the concept I had for this book came to me when I was finishing up my first book, Infinite Succulent, which is a succulent craft book. As soon as that was done and we were kind of waiting for it to come out, I had this idea for a book that was going to be all about the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual benefits of living and working with plants. And the reason I was interested in that is because that was the journey I had been on with plants, where before I started working with plants, I was very, very connected with nature, but I was also dealing with a lot of ecophobia, a lot of anxiety and depression, especially around the environment and around, where we currently find ourselves as a species with our relationship with the environment. And as a mom, I was dealing with a lot of anxiety around it. And the plants came in to help me remember the wellness in the world, help me remember the magic, the creativity, the connection, the beauty, the love, the prana always being sent to us. They helped me come back to a place of wellness despite all the destruction. So I wanted to share about that. And as I was finding this for myself, I was diving into the research about how plants affect us in the nervous system, how they really help with mental health, how they're affecting our bodies, how we can use herbs for, all kinds of different ailments. So I was just diving into the research of how plants impact us. And I was just like, my mind was blown. I'm like, everybody needs to know this, right? So I was pitching this book that was going to kind of be an encyclopedia of how plants impact all of us, which is everything. And I was getting a lot of rejection. And my first publishing house, when I first gave them this idea, they were really into it. And I thought it was going to be a go. And I was so excited. And then they brought it to the marketing team and they were like, no, this is a no for us. And so that was kind of heartbreaking. And I felt really sad. But from there, I kind of had a few weeks of just kind of anxiety and depression and what am I doing now? I don't know how to, at that time, I didn't have a literary agent. I didn't know how, and my editor and publishing house were like, ciao, So I was like, okay, how do I find other people now? And I was just kind of scared, right? But I invested in this spirit program with shaman Alyssa Charles, and I started for the first time investing in these kind of group masterminds around soul development and spiritual development. And I met the most amazing people and just started feeling things opening up inside of me. So I took a little break for a while, and then after doing some of these courses and feeling no, this is a real desire inside of me. I know this book wants to be written by me. I'm not giving up. Allison connected me with a really great writing coach. I started working with her, and then I started completely redoing the book proposal, sending it out. So much rejection, just so much. And then this one publishing house came back and was like, we really like this concept of the spiritual side of working with plants. I mean, we haven't seen that book yet. Do you think you can rewrite this proposal so that you're focusing on spiritual connection with plants. How can people use plants for more just spirituality in their life, spiritual impacts? So I wrote this beautiful proposal. I was so excited about it. Everything felt so good. It felt so aligned. I'm like, this is going to be the yes. My editor loved it, brought it to the marketing team, and they were like, we don't know how to position this book. We don't know how to sell this book. So I had like 3 days of like, meh, woe is me, like victim, right? Like, I don't know what's happening, what I'm doing. And then I was like, okay, that's enough victimhood. Like, let's just keep going from here. And then my editor came back and was like, okay, what if we shifted the focus, and instead of it being about spirituality, what if we made it more about plant magic, right? Like, everyone bought plants over COVID, but now how do people use them? How can they position them? How can they work with the plants to bring more energy into their life? And I was like, oh, so it's kind of the same book I proposed, but with a little bit of a different angle to it. So I had to sit with that for a few days, because at first I was like, well, do they want like a magic spell book? Because even though I self-identify as a green witch, and I definitely do work magic, like, I wouldn't be the person who's like, I'm the green witch, people should come to me for magical spells with plants. Like, to me, that felt like, that's not me. But then I had to really sit with my concept of magic. Like, what does magic actually mean to me? When they're asking for a book of plant magic, okay, well, what does magic mean? And that's when I actually realized that for me, magic is that spark of divine life force that's in everything. Magic is actually the knowing that every single thing around us is energy that's moving and vibrating, and that we live in this energetic world. That to me is magic. And the act of creating magic, the act of being magical, is intentionally moving, shifting, manipulating that energy. So when I was able to make that definition, I was like, oh, wait, that is exactly how I use plants. I totally use plants to make magic in my life and the life of my clients and the life of my home and my family. And so from there, I was like, oh yeah, no, this is the book. And what was so cool about it is that when I was actually sitting and writing the plant profiles, and I was going into like researching the ecology of the plants, the medicinal compounds of the plants, some of the metaphysical qualities of the plants, I just had this knowing as I'm doing this writing, this is the book I had conceptualized all the way back in 2018. Even in this writing right now, I'm diving into how these plants are affecting us, mind, body, soul, magic, right? And I'm getting chills even just talking about it again. So it was like I knew that this was the book I was going to write, but the universe knew way better than me how I was actually going to write it and how it was going to come about. And what was also really cool was that with each plant, yes, I was doing some research about the plant, but then I was also able to sit in meditation with each and every plant and ask the plant to share with me wisdom, messages that they want humanity to know right now. And I would never have been able to have done that if I had gotten the first book deal, because I didn't know that I had that inside of me. I didn't know I was a medium at that point. I didn't know how to sit in meditation and ask the plant to share its wisdom. So it was just such a beautiful confirmation and validation for me that every single bit of rejection I had was keeping me on this path to become the person who could write the book that is now actually going to be out in the world. So anyone out there who is dealing with rejection in your life right now, please don't give up. Please trust in this process, and please try to see if you can create some magic in your life by shifting that perspective to see how is this rejection actually shaping you into exactly where you want to go.
Thank you for that.
I don't know about anybody else, but I needed to hear that. It's so, you forget. I feel like we get wrapped up in this idea of failure and rejection. We get trapped in that victim and give up kind of mindset, because obviously I'm not good at it. I'm failing, right? But yes, failing is such a beautiful thing because it inspires growth and transition, right?
Yes.
I love that.
My husband is an educator, and he says to fail is actually an acronym, and FAIL stands for First Attempt in Learning. First attempt in learning. Yeah. And I think that if we could actually, and I think part of this is just the conditioning we have in our, especially here in the United States, like the Western society of everything being very like driven by the end goal, we very much diminish the value of the process itself. And I think that if we were actually taught from a very young age that failure is good, failure is the process of learning, then we would have a very different view of it and a very different energy around this concept of failure. And it's so interesting because I can know with my logical, conscious mind that every time I fail is just a learning opportunity. But my subconscious is like, you suck! You know what I mean?
Yep.
So it's like
a relearning. Yeah.
It's a total relearning. And I think actually nature and the plants are so there for us with that. A question I get so often is, okay, well, what does it mean if I kill my plants? Does that mean I have bad energy? Does that mean my home has bad energy? No. Does that mean the plants hate me? No, it doesn't mean any of those things. None of those things.
It really might suck because I can keep kids alive, but I can't keep plants alive.
You know what it means, Tara? It means that right now your focus is on growing kids and not plants.
It is.
And is that a failure? No, not at all. It's just feedback to let you know where your focus is right now. And for you in particular, yes, and we could chat a little bit more about that. But I think for you in particular, Tara, it's about, okay, well, what plants am I bringing in, right? Like
difficult ones.
Right. So I think when we're first talking about bringing, especially houseplants, into our life, yes, we want to think about the energy we want to bring in, and some plants are more active, yang energy that'll be more motivational, more inspirational. Some plants are more yin, restorative energy. So it's nice to know the energies of the plants so we can ascertain that for our rooms themselves and use that energy. But before that, what's even more important is to understand your home, how light moves throughout your home, sunlight, because that's part of what the plants need to survive. It's important to understand a little bit about the life cycle of the plants themselves and what their needs are, and then to truly know your own lifestyle and what you're willing and able to give to a plant right now. And for an example of that, I live in Southern California. It's dry, it's hot. I love ferns. When I was first getting into plants, I was like, look at all these beautiful like maidenhair ferns and all these beautiful little ferns. I'm so going to bring them in my home and have that like fern home. Yeah, no. I killed so many ferns because they don't thrive in the climate I live in. They like more humid, more just more water in the air climates, and it would require a whole like daily misting, sitting on a tray of water, and I just don't have that time to dedicate to plants in my lifestyle right now. I still love ferns. I still totally respect ferns and appreciate them. I just choose not to bring them into my house right now because I cannot provide for them what they need, and they're not able to provide for me what I need in this moment. And that's okay. That's okay. Actually, there is one fern that I still have, and that's the staghorn fern, because they are resilient AF. So that one.
Which is a sign of how resilient you are, I feel like.
Yeah, and a sense of like independence. And I, you know, for me personally, I don't like when people are like micromanaging me or like all over me. And so I feel like my plants are also ones who are like, just like I only need to be bothered. Like, just give me water like once a week. I'm good. You know?
Yeah. I feel that.
It's like a cat.
I also love when plants, like, I have a plant, I think it's called a Wandering Jew. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Which is such a funny name for a plant.
I wasn't sure if it was right. I wasn't sure if I was being
that's
offensive.
the common name. It has a the scientific name starts with tree, with a T. It's like Trifandiskia.
Yes.
I can see it in front of my face, but I can't say it.
Right. I've also read it, but I've not said it out loud. But I brought one into my home because I think they're so beautiful, and I killed it. And it's okay. But what was really beautiful about that process is I set it outside. I didn't get rid of it. I set the pot outside. I was like, I'm just going to leave it alone. And it had babies.
Yes.
And it came back to life. And I was like, what is this? it was, I don't know, it was a really beautiful learning experience.
Yes. And I think one thing, so I think first of all, it helps when we have plants that die, that we bring into our home and they die. I think first of all, it helps for us to not say, I killed it. It's more like, oh, I let it die. You know, I just let it die. And here, guys, I've been working with plants for over a decade now. I still kill plants, or I still let them die. You know, like it just happens. And the plants actually told me one time in meditation, because I was really curious, and I asked them, do you guys remember your past lives? And they do. Like they have full recollection of their past lives. They don't see death the way that humans do. Animals don't either. Animals and plants have a much more healthy understanding of death. They understand that death is not in opposition to life. It's a part of the life cycle. Humans, we have this weird thing that like death and life are opposite, which they are not. They're part of the same thing. But plants and animals really do have that understanding. And the plants shared with me that they remember their past lives. They remember their past iterations. So when they die, there's no sense of like blame or shame or guilt or pain or anything. They're like, on to the next. And they also recognize that their death is actually feeding life. You know, when they die, they turn into healthy soil again. They get composted and become the healthy earth from which their progeny will then grow again, right? So they do not see death the way we do. They do not blame us when they die. It's always a learning opportunity. So it could be, hey, this isn't a great plant for me in my lifestyle right now. It could be, hey, this back left corner, even though I want it for abundance, it's not great for my plant because it's not enough light, right? So there's a lot of different reasons why, and that's one of the things I do with my clients, with my plant consult, my plant liaison services, is help people with those specific things, with keeping plants alive or with understanding where to place plants to help them thrive in your home. But I think it's really, really important that we're very conscious of our own relationship with the plants, and when we're working with plants, that we don't allow ourselves to go to a place of blame, shame, or guilt when they pass, because that is actually in complete opposition to the messages the plants have for us, which is messages of absolute love and worth and deservingness just for being. I mean, that's like the core message of every plant. Yes, each plant will have more than that, but the core message of every plant is you are worthy and deserving of life and love because you exist.
I felt that deeply. I have a very specific question towards plants, because I feel like so many of us go back and forth between this. Well, I'm going to get fake plants because I don't want to kill plants, right? But I want to get real plants because it's really helping bring the airflow. What are your thoughts on that? You know, I'm balancing the two. Am I cheating? Like,
No, I don't believe in cheating when it comes to biophilia, because what you're kind of describing with this idea of like wanting the aesthetic of plants, which is kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about fake plants. What you're talking about is this idea that we actually feel better when we see greenery. And there is so much science behind this, like so much science behind what happens to our mind on green, like when we actually can see greenery, that talks about like just the nervous system and how it quiets like the prefrontal cortex and kind of brightens up the part of our mind that does more like higher perspective thinking. And there's a lot about forest bathing with this too. But I think ultimately, when it comes to fake plants, there is this sense of a nervous system reboot that you can still get with fake plants. And for those who are not aware of biophilia, biophilia means love of life. Bio is life, philia means love. And a Harvard professor who was a biologist back in, I believe it was the 1970s, he came up with something called the biophilia hypothesis, which states that because humans evolved in nature, we have a biological we are biologically set up through our DNA to have a love for other forms of life. This is why we love our pets, right? Like this is why pets exist, is because as humans, we are biologically wired to love other species and to love plant life. So this is the hypothesis. It goes a little bit further to say, since we evolved in nature, our cells actually function better when we are exposed to nature, because that's how we evolved. And if that's true, then perhaps the flip side of that is also true, which is that we do not function as well when we are disconnected from natural spaces and natural items. And I think that's kind of where we find ourselves right now. So if you're deciding you want to bring the aesthetic of plants into your spaces, but let's say you live in a really dark spot, or for example, I've done some work with restaurants where they want really beautiful, gorgeous arrangements that are going to be right above a booth. And they don't want, like water dripping, and there's no light coming in. So here we're talking about creating something really beautiful, but functionally, the plants aren't going to be able to thrive with that. So in that situation, I suggest to my client, hey, let's do fake here. For this wall, let's do fake. For outside, let's do real, right? And that way you're still gaining the beauty of it, but you're also gaining like the physical and biological aspects of it too. So there is a time and place for fake plants, and there will be benefits you will get from that, especially on the nervous system level, in the sense of just allowing yourself to be relaxed by the beauty around you. Now, when we're talking about working with real plants, we're also talking about things like oxygen production. We're talking a little bit about air purification. There's been some back and forth. I mean, there was a really famous study that NASA put out in the early 80s that was basically stating that houseplants are able to clean the air. There's been a lot of backlash against that, because if you were like to look at the science, it's like, well, you'd actually need to have like 25 plants in this small space to really clean the air, in terms of like how much. But ultimately, we know that that plants create oxygen, and that we also know that as they breathe, they pull toxins from the air. So we know they have the ability to do that. So even just a little bit helps. But plants also create negative ions, and negative ions are really, really important for us, especially with our mental health. So negative ions are positively charged molecules in the air. They are not found in human-created structures. You will not find them in a building. You will find them out in nature. You'll find them off the plants. You'll find them by running water. You'll find a lot of them after like a thunderstorm. So if you want negative ions in your home, bring in plants. And when we breathe in negative ions, it actually increases our body's production of more feel-good hormones like serotonin. And I've seen some research that's found that negative ions also even diminish like dust production and can diminish the amount of allergens in your home as well.
I like the idea of getting fake plants and spritzing it with some essential oil that smells like a plant.
I love that. And you know what's funny about that is the essential oils actually have a huge impact on our physiology along with our mental health through the limbic system. So through smelling that, it actually does have a big increase on what's happening inside your body. Well, not increase, but like it'll shift things in terms of what's happening inside your body. So that'll work.
I would love for you to kind of talk with people about, with the Magick Weavers here, about how it felt to shift your mindset around something. You're like, whenever we step into this idea, or we're given this idea from the divine, whatever you want to call it, for a book, for example, as we're talking about, this is what I want it to be. This is what it's supposed to be, and then we go along the path and like these other ideas come along, or that's not quite right. And we're so stuck on, well, but this is what it's supposed to be. How do you shift from that and still feel in alignment and feel authentic without, beating yourself down or feeling like, you got it wrong, whatever it is? How do you feel like you shifted from that and just accepted, yes, this is where it's supposed to go. It's a natural progression, and not fighting it?
That is a really, really good question. Because I think there's some areas in my life where I feel like I've been able to really like move into that space of allowing for the shift. And then there's other places in my life where I'm still like pretty stubborn. Perhaps I haven't fully let it in yet. But hey, that's the journey, right? So thinking about what you shared, I mean, I think at first it came for me just with working with the plants, with like creating art from them and just feeling them and working with the soil. And I think for me, just the initial shift was just opening up to pleasure again in some ways, because before I kind of allowed myself that artistic experience with nature, I always felt that I've always had a very soul relationship with nature and the natural world. I've always gone to nature to soothe my soul when I'm hurting. But it was always kind of passive, like going for a walk or just like sitting around and opening to see things. But there was always this part of my mind. I didn't know how to get out of my head yet at that point. And so I would be at a beautiful place and then I'd be like, oh, well, in 5 years, this will probably be burnt down because of climate change. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't allow myself to really open to the beauty, to the majesty of this now moment, because my brain would get in and tell me how terrible everything actually is. And, you know, like everyone's going to die and this planet's dying and we're all dying and, you know, all that. And so when I actually started to like get quiet and still and make art with the plants, the first shift I really felt was this reminder that was coming from the plants of like, look, we're all still growing. We're all still thriving. Yes, it's true that humanity is running off a cliff right now in terms of their actions, especially with the environment. That's true, no doubt. But look at the trees growing. Look at the birds singing. Hear them, feel them. Look at our vibrancy. Feel our vibrancy. Look at this gorgeous art you just made. Feel that, right? And so it was like, it really was this remembrance of... And I didn't know how to put words to it yet. It wasn't until I started studying energy work that I had the words to describe what I was feeling. But what I was actually feeling was the remembrance that the divine force of energy flowing to all of us and flowing to Earth is prana, is life force energy. And I completely forgotten that. Completely forgotten that. I think most of us forget it. That's the remembrance that's in our DNA, right? Like that is the actual remembrance that we're not taught in our current society. So once I started studying energy work, I could put words to that feeling, that first shift, which was remembering that despite all the quote unquote crap shit stuff we don't want, was also the other side of the fact that we're still being fed prana every single day, every single moment. We just need to open to it again. So that was the first big shift that came for me. And that didn't feel like an epiphany. It felt more gradual, where I was just noticing, like it started off with me just noticing that when I was doing this, I didn't have the monkey mind of anxiety. When I was doing this, I was in the present moment. And there is so much magic in the present moment. When we are in the present moment, we can't feel anxious unless there's actually something in the present moment that is causing us to, like we're in the present moment, we're running from a dog. You know what I mean? Like if we're in the present moment and everything is good, we can't actually feel anxious in that moment. So that was the first of it. And then as I continued to work with the plants, it was always kind of subtle and gradual. And then I remember there's this one night, and this was before I then got deeper into actually taking courses to cultivate my intuition. This was kind of like the little breadcrumbs that even guided me to take courses that then led me to unlock my mediumship and intuitive gifts. But I remember one night in meditation, I'd had a beautiful day and I was just sitting in meditation, and all of a sudden I could hear my plants around me, the ones that are around me right now. And they were saying to me so clearly, look at us. Look at us. Like, we are so not perfect. We've got brown, crispy edges in some places. This leaf is yellow. Like, we're not perfect. But look how we're growing. We're always growing. We don't strive to be perfect. Why do you? Like, where does that come from? You know? And I was just like, whoa, like, I really hear them. Like, if anyone has had a moment where they hear something in their mind that they know is not them, but they hear it really, really clearly, like that is kind of an epiphany moment for you. And it doesn't feel like you're going crazy. If anyone's listening to this and has not experienced this yet, just know it does not feel like you're going crazy. It feels like you're having a conversation with someone in your head. And you know very clearly that you're having a conversation with someone who is not you. But you're hearing their response. So I had that with the plants, and that is kind of what guided me to learn about what the hell just happened. And can I bring this up more? Like, can I actually tap into this when I desire? And I'm so glad that I did, because it's shifted everything for me.
I love hearing that. It is such a a surreal moment once you realize plants are talking to you. I remember the first time, I think it was with lemon balm. It was with the lemon balm. It was one of the first plants I started working with. I was making tea, and I'm always really intentional with my tea, and I was sitting out in the sun, and it hit me about, some of the masculine energy and the ways that it was really soothing, and it's like lemon, but not acidic, and just the medicine that it was hitting me. And I was like, what is talking to me right now? What is happening? And it almost feels like you're crazy. And then you realize, no, this is the energy that I'm tapping into right now. This is growth right here. And it's such a beautiful experience. So no, Magick Weaver, you are not crazy.
Well, and then here's my question for that, right? For those who feel the desire to sit with something, right? So for example, mine would be this blasted black widow fake spider I have, like sitting with, it's fake, but sitting with it, like meditating with it. Or I have felt the desire to look at the plants that have so kindly passed on as they were trying to survive and like tap into their energy. But I have resistance against both of those things. I have resistance against holding this damn spider in my hand and just saying, what wisdom do you have for me? Or in general, right? Just sitting with that. How do you work through that?
Do you have to hold it in your hands to connect with it?
That's a good question. No.
Is that an expectation you've placed on yourself?
It probably is, yeah. Because that's what I see is like holding it right here and like connecting with it. But I need to work up to that. But it's just the resistance around connecting, I think.
What if instead of so here's what I'm feeling right now. And of course, you tell me if this feels resonant or not. It feels to me like it's coming from a place of almost like you're challenging yourself. And then it feels like I need to accomplish this, right? Mm-hmm. But I think what you really want to do is ask Black Widow to come to you and talk to you.
There's so many Black Widows around.
How does that, is that what you're wanting? Are you wanting to connect in with Black Widow and ask for, like, why is she showing up for you right now?
There's a message of spiders right now. Spiders have been...
You've always had a spider thing.
Yeah, but it grew.
It's been real strong lately.
It's really strong because I haven't tapped into it. I've done a little bit of work around it. Mm-hmm. Like I was filling my kid's pool and there was a spider in it. It looked like a Black Widow, but it was hairier and shorter. And I was like, that's not, but it is, but it's not. And I accidentally killed it, I think. But then I looked at, like those kinds of things. There's orb weavers, which are gorgeous.
I love orb weavers. Yeah, they're great.
But they're gorgeous. They're all around our back porch.
This is the time of year that we see a lot of those. Yes. Yeah.
So, they have been coming out more so because I've been noticing them and because I've been resisting as well. Like I've been going back and forth between the energy.
Mm-hmm. I'm just feeling in for a moment.
Well, and it's also funny because like as these past two plants I tried to revive have continued to not be revived. My husband's friend, they tried to close on their house and they didn't get a chance to. And so he brought us all of their plants to keep alive for him. And it's a lot. It's a lot.
That's a lot.
Like, it's a lot. Like they have tomatoes and 2 or 3 things of basil and mint and like raspberries. It's a lot. They're beautiful. Wow. And I'm like, I want these to be alive for you when you come back for them.
So do you have them outside right now? All those plants?
They are outside. I've had Justin move some of them to the back because there's so much sun in the front that it's too much for a lot of them. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But then he was like, they look like they're dying. So I was like, yeah, move them.
Dappled shade, indirect bright light.
Mm-hmm. So it's like I haven't connected with that and with spiders. It's right. I feel it.
So what I'm getting with the spider in particular for you is instead of coming at it from a place of like, I need to rise to this challenge, because that's kind of the energy I'm getting at, is this sense of like, this is like I need to complete this goal kind of feel. Mm-hmm. And instead flip it around and ask spider, like ask her to come to you. So instead of creating what feels like a goal setting thing and almost like I'm going to slay this challenge kind of feel.
And I think for those that have like the slaying the challenge feel, it's I'm in control versus releasing that control. Because if we release it, that's very fearful that, what could actually come through, right?
Yes. But what I'm feeling from you is a sense of like actually wanting the wisdom to come through, right? Like what's the message and like the wisdom that is trying to be sent to you right now. That's what you're actually wanting to connect with. So if you can release your expectation or the pressure you're putting on yourself to make that connection and just instead create an invitation for Spider to come to you, I think you're going to feel like the resistance is completely going to drop, and you're going to actually just have it a drop in of Spider energy come to you in a moment when you're ready for it. Does that make sense?
The projector, yes. you're a projector, right?
Yes.
I see that. Like the invitation, the manifestor in me is like, just go do it.
But I think you can. Yeah, but I think you can create you can use your manifesting energy to create that invitation. And this is kind of like where magic comes in. This is often why I think magic and using magical rituals is so powerful, is because we want to take action. We want to quote unquote control, right? And I was just talking with someone else on her podcast about this very concept. But like when we do a magical ritual, we're taking all of this desire, this intention, this co-creation energy, right? And we're creating something ritualistic so we can take action, and we're taking kind of something that's more ethereal and like bringing it into the physical. But when we take this action through a ritual, we actually, as part of the ritual, we release the control and the expectation of when it's going to come to us. So it's like we can align energetically with what we're calling in, because we pour that into the intentionality of the ritual itself. We're taking the action that as our human, we just feel like we need to do. It helps calm the mind and the control, and it also shows to the universe, not only am I aligning energetically, but I'm putting my action behind this too, right? And then we do this beautiful part that when we're kind of manifesting without these rituals is so hard for us, which is that we release the control and we actually surrender into the faith and trust in the universe itself to co-create with us. So with the spider, I'm assuming you have the fake Black Widow as part of this invitation.
They love playing with it.
Yeah, and I feel like it's actually part of what you're asking for to call in, right? So, okay, I just saw something kind of funny. I saw an image of you like creating a little like Halloween decoration by you hanging a bunch of fake spiders around your workspace. Just having them like hanging from the ceiling as if they're like dropping in.
You look enthused about that, Tara.
I'm thinking about like the outside. There's this spot where you could put like spider webs hanging down and stuff outside and stuff.
Yeah, and this is the perfect time of year for that too, right? For the decoration and stuff. So for you, honestly, it does feel like a little bit of a shift of a mindset and an energy around the connection you're actually calling in. Whereas opposed to it feeling controlling and kind of like high pressure, you turn it more into an invitation and an opening to receive.
It's kind of similar to what you were telling Alyssa before we started our interview with you.
Yeah.
But I think that's I think that's what people tend to do, right? Is like, as a society, we put on what we should be doing, what should happen, the way it should go, versus, I desire this, and what does it feel like, and releasing that, because it feels like, having that control is easier to maintain, because when you release control, well, you don't have control.
Yeah. And I think this is often what we talk about in manifestation, which is this idea of like the energy that we bring into things is often the energy we receive as well. And I think often when we talk about manifestation, and, you know, manifestation is such a hot topic, and, you know, it can, sometimes it's a hot buzzword. And I think sometimes it can really play into like the unconscious consumerism that can also still exist in the spiritual and wellness spaces. But I think ultimately we have to remember that we're always manifesting, whether we're manifesting consciously or subconsciously. Like, as we are living on this earth, we are always manifesting and co-creating with what's happening around us. So I think once we kind of recognize that, then we can bring the intentionality into it and recognize, hey, what energy am I bringing into this co-creation right now? And that's, again, where the magic comes in, where the miracles come in of being able to shift our own perspective and our own perception of things from time to time. And there are certain times where we do just have to plug on through, right? Like, there are times in life where our energy isn't necessarily where we want it to be, but we still got to get things done. And that's okay too. You know, like, that's where we take those moments to commend ourselves for just doing it, for just getting it through. And that's where the perspective shift can be for us in those moments.
So we love on our podcast to challenge our magic weavers for growth. What do you think would be a good challenge for them this week?
That's a really good question. Let me tap in a little bit with that, because I'm thinking about the energies we're in right now too, right? So, okay. So we just had autumn equinox, right? Which is all about balancing. And I think, Tara, you mentioned this a little bit too. Like, when we're heading into autumn equinox, with both equinoxes, those are portals of balance, because we have like day and night being almost completely equal. But as we head into autumn equinox, we're really thinking about balancing out and giving honor and value to our shadow side, because we are heading into the darker season now, right? We're heading into the season where the darkness is going to be greater than the light, in the sense of like daylight and night hours. So thinking about that, and then the Libra new moon we have this week, and then Rosh Hashanah too, the start of the Jewish New Year, there's a big energy of balance. So I think our challenge this week could be around balance. So two ways to kind of go about that. One is just to become aware of where in your life do you feel like things are very balanced, and where in your life do you feel like things are imbalanced? Like, do you feel like you're putting way more energy into your social life right now, and perhaps a little bit less into your personal life and your personal, you know, introspection? Or maybe you're putting all your energy into work and you're like, my family's suffering. So just become aware. No shame, no blame, no need to like throw everything up and change everything. It's just the awareness to start off with. Where am I wanting more balance? And then the second one, which is more introspective, is how can I more embrace my shadow? How can I really fully love on those parts of myself that I often try to hide?
I think those are going to be some beautiful thought processes for all of us to like dive into ourselves. And I think balance is very huge, like you said, right now, as we are shifting, because we're focusing so much on outward. At least I am. It's like so much on outward, and I'm forgetting the inward, as I clearly already said, of like not wanting to go meditate with things. So that's a very beautiful thought.
And to bring it back to plants, there are definitely plants that can support us with the balance too. So actually, Alyssa, you mentioned lemon balm earlier, and lemon balm is such a great example of a plant to utilize, especially if you find yourself doing some shadow work. Lemon balm is so supportive, so optimistic, so sunny,
so gentle.
Yeah, and lemon balm really reminds us to connect in with that sun inside of ourselves, that sense of like lit up solar energy that we all have inside of ourselves. So it's fantastic for the solar plexus. And when we're doing shadow work, we really want to make sure we're infusing our solar plexus, which is the chakra that governs our sense of self-love, self-identity, self-worth. So lemon balm is fantastic for that, in terms of an herb you can use. And then, sorry, my kids are excited downstairs right now. And then in terms of a house plant that I really, really love, for especially the kind of integration of light and shadow too, that I love. One is very common. Most people will be familiar, Pathos. Pathos is fantastic for dancing with the dark and with the light. Just look at the way she grows in those jungles, and she's in the understory, and she climbs up the trees to find sunlight, yet she also just makes these beautiful, I mean, she's just so good at that, like, shadow integration. And then another one is Syngonium, a little, not as well known, but Syngonium is another great houseplant that is really beautifully balanced in yin and yang energies, and is another one that reminds us to come back to our heart space and just have full and unconditional sense of self-acceptance.
Thank you so much for all of your guidance. Tell us, when is your fabulous book coming out? What is the date?
When is the book coming out? Tell us about the pre-order gifts. Tell us all the gifts.
Amazing. Okay, so I love sharing when the book is coming out, because this is such a good example about how when you start syncing with the moon starts syncing with you. So my book is actually scheduled to release on October 25th, which just so happens to be new moon Scorpio eclipse, solar eclipse. So it's the very start of eclipse season, and it's on a new moon, which is all about new beginnings, right? Like such a beautiful day for a book to be launched on a new moon. And I did not plan that. I did not ask my publishing house for that. That just happened very organically. And when you start working with new moons and full moons, you will start realizing that you have these opportunities for sharing and for just like connection that aligns with the moons. So book comes out October 25th, but you can totally pre-order now. You can head to Amazon, find it there, Everyday Plant Magic. You can also head to my website, infinitesucculent.com. I am offering some pre-order gifts as well. So if you go ahead and pre-order on Amazon or I have a whole like different.
We'll put the links in the description. Yeah.
And there's also other places, like if you don't want to buy on Amazon, there's other ways you can buy the book too. But if you just take a little screenshot of your receipt on my website, infinitesucculent.com, there's a little space where you could submit that, and you will get a free guided tree meditation from me. You will also be RSVP'd to my virtual book launch party, which will be October 26th. And at the virtual book launch party, I'll be giving out 5 gifts, 5 prizes too. So you'll be entered to win one of those prizes as well. So, and then in probably a week, I'm just going to open up the book launch party to anyone who wants to attend. But it's always nice for you to kind of have your RSVPs in there, because I think I'm probably going to put a cap on it. But anyway, so you can go to infinitesucculent.com. I actually have a whole like book launch page there. So if you go to my website, there's on the top, it says shop, and if you click that, you'll see Everyday Plant Magic. Just click there and it'll take you to everything you need to know right there.
Oh, and this book is stunning. If you have not seen it, go check out Rachael's Instagram or her book section of her website. It's so beautiful. I cannot wait.
It is so beautiful, and like the publishing house was so intentional with it. It actually has this like texture to it that kind of feels like the leaf of a plant. So you kind of want to stroke it, like you want to like pet your book.
Show us real quick, because we put this on YouTube. So if you're on YouTube, come check it out. We're gonna look at her book.
We worked with the most amazing illustrator named Maya Hanish, and she is a artist and illustrator out of Chile. And she did these like beautiful, these are all paintings, but they're so lifelike that they almost look like photos. And she just had, I mean, you could see these are all her illustrations on the front. And it's just this beautiful combination of like scientific illustration with like magical whimsy. So it kind of reminds me of that kind of like magical realism of like Gabriel Garcia Marquez or Isabel Allende. And I just love that feel of like realism with magic, which is kind of what this is all about, which is like the blending of our reality and recognizing that our reality is actually filled with magic.
Well, you heard her here first and second before she's like this famous, massive author.
Which is happening because we're manifesting that.
I'm receiving.
But thank you so much for being on here. Definitely go grab
This
her
concludes
book,
another
and
episode of our
we will see
Weaving
you
Magic
next time
podcast.
on the
We
Weaving
release
Magic
one
podcast.
episode a week, so be sure to subscribe to catch the latest episode as soon as it releases. You can find us on Instagram at Weaving Magick Podcast. That's Weaving Magick, Magick Podcast.
We would also love it if you could leave us a review. If you do, make sure to email us your review so we can send you a thank you gift. Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to find a way to weave magic into your daily life.